Hey guys, so this is the video dated for Monday, and you're checking this out, watching this video, taking some notes, working through some material related to Socrates. That's really what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today is our character and some of the philosophy connected to Socrates. We just started Democritus on Friday. I told you I was going to be brief with him. Democritus is important to us in part because of what he does for us when it comes to understanding how natural philosophers thought. And so Democritus represents a school of thought that really is looking at the world around and trying to figure out how it works and what we can do to explain why it works the way that it works and why any of it matters for the way we live our lives and for the way that we do ethics and for the way that we do fill in the blank. And so this atomist theory or this atomist doctrine is built around this idea that atoms exist and the void exists, and that's it. And so atoms cluster together and create things, and then atoms disintegrate, right? They pull apart and they become other things or whatever else. Knowledge then, okay, is a function of encountering things, okay, and thinking about what's been encountered. That's the easiest way to put it, okay? Thought and perception are changes or sensations that we experience, and we process that experience. So the idea is that our knowledge is based on the reception of images from outside of us, okay? And then we process it and draw conclusions about what we've encountered, and that is what knowledge is based on. That's where knowledge comes from. And in that regard, then it's in part what drives the ethics, okay? His ethics are really sketchy as far as Democritus is concerned. It's based on what we know. I'll simplify it for us. It's based on what we know. And then from the basis of what we know, we draw conclusions about what's right. So what exists are these atoms in the void. As we encounter the world around us, we intake that information and we process it. As we intake the raw information of the world around us and think about it, we learn things about cause and effect, about connections. And that's really what we get to. It's the thoughts in our head from the raw sensory information that is knowledge in the world of Democritus, right? So just like we look at the table and realize that the atoms are arranged and organized to be like the table, I now know what the table is because I'm thinking about the object in front of me and its composition. But just putting my hand on the table doesn't mean that I know the table, because that's sensory, that's just raw data, that's just raw input. Ethics is a function of being able to take in the data of a given situation, process it, think it through, draw a conclusion, and based on the conclusion drawn, do the right or do the good thing. And so there's not a set. What gets described in atomist theory or atomist doctrine and these early natural philosophers when it comes to ethics is more about the how we come to ethical decisions and not the what makes ethical decisions or not. And therein lies my bridge from Democritus to Socrates. First, let's get to know Socrates. Second, let's talk about why Socrates is important. Third, let's talk about some of the major contributions Socrates makes. First, and I'll come back and highlight why I'm making the bridge with ethics, but I'll get there, I promise. So first, Socrates lives sometime around 469 to about 399 BC, so about 70 years. He's a bit of a mysterious figure, and we only know Socrates because of what Plato writes down for us. Plato does a series of works, and one of those works is called Dialogues, and he imagines conversations or he's recording conversations of Socrates with other individuals. And this is how we know what Socrates had to say. Plato wrote it down from conversations that Socrates had with other individuals, or Plato wrote sort of allegories of conversations Socrates would have had with these individuals. But when it comes to Socrates, just about all of our information is secondhand, okay? And a lot of it is disputed, okay? But his trial and his death in Athens, okay, is the sort of the founding story, okay, of this academic discipline that philosophy is becoming because of Socrates, okay? So let's do it this way. Socrates is an individual in the 400s BC who, like we've encountered in the work Know Thyself, pressed the limits and asked questions and challenged preconceived notions and ideas, and wanted to get access to what is true and what is right, not just what is accessible to us because it's accessible. And so he really wanted, if we say, like Democritus, that atoms make up this table that my computer is sitting on and you can't see on the screen, but if we wanted to say that atoms make it up, how do I know that? Or why does it have to be that way? Why do we say that atoms make this table up? Where's the insight that provides us with that set of information? And what we get from Socrates is two things. Number one, a willingness to question things that are conventionally accepted, or a willingness to question things even when it seems inconvenient or annoying. And this is Socrates' driving factor in everything he does. Remember, in the Know Thyself material, Socrates spends the whole time just asking questions of people who are supposed to know things. So the carpenter knows how to make a table, and he's got this artistic insight into how to do that. And that makes the carpenter think that he's got this sort of grand set of knowledge that he doesn't actually have. Well, Socrates wants to know why the carpenter thinks he knows what he knows. Socrates wants to know, is that really the way that it works, the way the carpenter explains things? Socrates wants to know, what do we do with the information that we have once we have it? What do we do with our thinking about certain topics because we think that way about that topic? And so Socrates asks questions, and he presses on things that make the most sense. So if we look at the Greek myths and we look at Socrates, here's where we end up. Socrates asks questions of why the world is the way that it is. And the myth's answer is the stories of the gods. Socrates doesn't seem to think that those stories of the gods make a lot of sense. To many, there has to be a better explanation. Where did the gods come from? So what we end up with in Socrates is a person, okay, who was really good at asking questions. And if we look carefully and consider the work in Know Thyself, took very seriously understanding our own limits to what we can and cannot know. So that's layer number one. Layer number two in this is that develops into a method of study for philosophy. Socrates creates, ironically, or not ironically, Socrates creates what we call the Socratic method. The Socratic method is a series of asking questions and then drawing conclusions based on the information present as we ask questions. So, if I asked us to describe God, and we all shared what that was like, or what God was like, then what we would do is sit around and say, okay, so why do we say these things? What is it about this that makes the most amount of sense? And is there a common thing we all know because we say the same things? Or is there a thing that's driving our common set of information, a common tradition or a common theology or a common whatever? And so this question and answer model becomes Socrates' model for how we do philosophy. It's not about speculating and forecasting answers out into things. It's about asking questions and then drawing the most logical conclusion on the basis of the information that we have and the questions that we ask. Socrates, however, seems to be most concerned with the questions we can't answer than he is about the questions that have rather easy answers. Why do human beings exist? Well, you can ask that question and then you can answer it in a relatively simple way. You and I, as human beings, exist because of our parents. That's a reason why. I'm here because of my parents. You are here because of your parents. Okay. Well, great. But if I'm not asking a sort of mechanical question about how you or I got here or why we're here, and I ask a philosophic, I want to change the wording on that, not philosophic. If I ask a more eternal question, why are human beings here in the first place? Not how did we get here, not what's the mechanism that brought us here, but why are we here? What's our purpose and role in the universe, in the cosmos, in the grand created order that we happen to inhabit? Why are we here? What is it that human beings are supposed to be and be about? If we ask that question, well, that's a question that information about this realm of existence may not necessarily be able to answer. It's definitely a question that current science can't answer. They can explain a mechanism, but they can't explain the bigger sort of meta question about what we are that's more than just a composition of materials, or about why we are the way we are, or about how it works to be a human person in this weird combination of body and soul. And Socrates is concerned with these kinds of questions and their lack of answer. And Socrates is so good at pressing the issue and asking these questions that eventually he starts to create a problem. This is kind of the story of Socrates. And people start to really listen to him because it doesn't seem like these more important questions have good answers and established ways of thinking about it during this time frame. And so he starts to gather a bit of a following, and then he gets accused of corrupting the youth. Because Socrates says that the gods of the Greek myths don't sound good enough to be gods. Their moral character isn't right. Something about them is flawed. There's a whole host of issues that he has. And so he starts to press these questions. Really, why? Is it okay that they are the way that they are? Is it okay that we are the way that we are? And so he gets challenged with corrupting the youth. And in that, he ends up being condemned to die for denying the gods of Athens. Well, his martyrdom is something that catalyzes Plato, and it leads him into something we're going to look at next Thursday when we get back together. And it's our introduction to Platonic thought. And what it is what's called the allegory of the cave. And it's a conversation that Plato's imagining between Socrates and somebody else. And it's both Plato's understanding of how the world works in truth and a scathing critique of why Socrates dies. So we'll look at that when we get together on the Thursday of next week. But Socrates asks questions and he wants to know what's what. Socrates seeks out truth even when it's seemingly inconvenient or a bit of a problem. What is probably most important about this figure of Socrates is the fact that Socrates believed in absolute truth, like big T, capital truth. And that truth drove everything. And it made the most sense to Socrates that if there is truth at all, it's absolute all the time. And so when we start talking about the way things are, for Socrates, things are according to some kind of truth. So we talk ontology, how things exist and why they exist. Socrates believed there is a truth that guides and governs what is, how it is, and why it is. In contrast, the Bible says there is a truth that set things how they were, why they were, and somehow that truth has been compromised. And things are not anymore the way they were originally. And this part, I think, is part of what Socrates is trying to get at. Because I think there's part of Socrates in his search for the way things are and why they are the way that they are, where he's really looking for, is it supposed to be this way? Okay. Sorry, distracted by the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, making sure I'm staying on top of things with Socrates here. But Socrates is one of our first philosophers who's not just concerned about explaining the natural world around him, but he's concerned about explaining hows and whys for that natural world. Is there a good reason why or how something is the way that it is? If there isn't a good reason for how and why it is the way that it is, what's gone wrong with it? And it's this question and answer that Socrates wants to do. He always wants to go back and forth on it, and he wants to do this dialogue between all of this. How we know is really a function of our ability to ask questions for Socrates. You only really know something as you ask questions of it and process the information that comes your way to draw out good conclusions and make sort of right choices in accordance with the truth. And that really is the crux of it for Socrates. He wants to know, what do we think about these things? Why do we think that way about these things? And what in that stream of thought has merit and what needs adjusting. We're going to leave Socrates there for now, and we'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay. You'll get a lecture like this today, Monday. You'll get it Tuesday, and then Wednesday you'll have time to work. Okay. So we'll see you guys soon. I hope you're having a good week. And yeah, hopefully these are helpful. All right. Talk soon.